A couple of weeks ago I was watching the Spotlight show on the Channel 7 where Bruce McAvaney was interviewing the young sprint star Gout Gout. Gout is from a South Sudanese background but born in Australia, and at the end of last year he broke the longest standing track record in Australia, Peter Norman's 200 metre time set at the 1968 Olympics. Gout ran the time in 20.04, and that's fast. It's even faster than what Usain Bolt ran when he was the same age. And it got me thinking about the stages and the mechanics of running such a race. You start off in a stationary and crouched position, and you need to concentrate on the starting pistol. And when it goes, you need to accelerate quickly. That's the first stage. And then the second stage is you get into a rhythm and find your top speed. And lastly, as you tire, you need to keep an eye on the finishing line and put all your energy into hanging in to the very end. Now that's also a parable of the Christian life, isn't it? Where a parable is an everyday thing that you can use as a metaphor to teach about God's kingdom. God's kingdom is like a sprint race where you have to enter the race and concentrate on the one who controls the race, Jesus Christ. You need to grow in holiness as the race progresses, and you need to persevere despite your tiredness until the very end. So let's use this picture to help us understand the second half of Matthew 13, where there are 7 parables or pictures about the kingdom of heaven all strung together. Jesus is teaching his disciples about the kingdom of heaven, about being in the very presence of God, having Jesus as your king, living with him as the ruler of your life. It's a corporate thing. It's about us doing life together under God's rule, but it's also an individual thing. You and I are running the race of our lives. And like any race, it has a start. Verse 44, the kingdom of heaven is like the treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all that he had and bought that field. You enter the race when you find the hidden treasure of the gospel of Jesus Christ and give up everything in order to possess it. That's when you join the kingdom of heaven. And that kingdom is sometimes found by us when we're least expecting it. So in the parable, the man is just walking in a field, or was he working in that field? And when out of the corner of his eye he sees something that grabs his attention. His heart beats a bit faster, he gets down on his hands and knees and he starts digging and digging until he finds something beyond his wildest dreams. Buried treasure. And what does he do? He doesn't own the field. If he takes it away from the resting place, he's stealing this treasure. That's what the law says. But what if he buys the field? Then the treasure is his. So you can imagine he buries it even deeper, makes himself a treasure map, spends the next period of time raising up the cash to buy the field, and then the treasure is all his, and his joy is complete. It's a bit far-fetched, isn't it? Actually, not at all. There were no banks in Jesus' days, and there were regularly other clans or neighbouring nations wanting to take over someone else's land. So one of the best ways to protect your assets was not to put them under your mattress, but to bury them. And someone might have done that and then been killed in the war or died unexpectedly. And who knows how long that treasure has been in that field. I was reading recently about a tenant farmer in Suffolk in England, a man named Peter Watling. One day he loses his hammer, and so he asks his friend for a metal detector, who has a metal detector, for some help. And they don't find the hammer. Instead they discover, buried in the field, the largest hoard of 5th century Roman artefacts in the entire world, worth about $8 million. The parable is saying that's how you and I start the race of life. We may not be looking for it, but one day we're told about the location of the best treasure in the whole wide world, the kingdom of heaven. And it's so good, we're willing to give up everything in order to receive it. We'll give up our life, our soul, our all. For even at such a high price, it's an absolute bargain. It's why we've been made. It gives us the joy that life was given us for. It's worth everything for us. That's how we start the race. We give up all that we have in order to claim it for ourselves. But sometimes it just doesn't come out of the blue. Other times we search and search for the kingdom, and then we find it, and we know straight away this is exactly what we're looking for. Verse 45, again the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it. The pearl of great price, says the pearl trader. I finally found the one. It's so beautiful. He doesn't want to trade it and make money from it. He just wants to possess it. So he sells everything, his business, his other pearls, to get the thing that's captured his heart. God's gospel, the kingdom of heaven, is like that. Yes, there are other pearls on the market. There's family and fame, food and things. But there's nothing quite like Jesus. Justin Martyr lived in the 2nd century. By all accounts, he was a brilliant professor of philosophy who knew all about the competing philosophies of his day. But one day he met a little old man in the fields who told him about Jesus. And he started reading the Bible and he was convinced this was the philosophy of life that he'd been looking for. He gave up his old position and his old lifestyle, bought the pearl of great price, and lived for Jesus from then on. And he even died for Jesus after being a great writer and apologist for him for the rest of his life. And this passage is saying there are all sorts of treasures and pearls out there in the world you can find and taste and seek. But there's only one that will truly satisfy your heart's desire. And it's the kingdom of heaven. It's found in King Jesus. And we need to give up everything to possess it. Now, the cost of discipleship is very great indeed. If you want to start the race for real life, it'll involve taking up the cross and following him wherever he calls you to go. But it's going to be worth it. It's the path, the only path to true joy. Friends, knowing Jesus Christ, enjoying the forgiveness that he can provide, being adopted into his family, made heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ, being changed into his likeness from one degree of glory to another, being comforted in all our sorrows, rebuked in all our wanderings, preserved through all our dangers, brought safely home at last, is the treasure in the field that we have stumbled across. It's the pearl of great price that we've been looking for all of our life. Let it capture your heart. Let it fill your gaze. Let it change your life. It's how you start the race of life. But it's also going to affect how you run the middle place part of this race. For verse 31, the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows, it's the largest of all garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches. God's kingdom might begin small, but it's going to grow large. It might look insignificant, but it's highly significant. It might be overlooked like a mustard seed, but it will overcome all sorts of time and trouble like a mustard tree. For in the end, the kingdom of heaven will be bigger than you and I can even imagine. The book of Revelation says there'll be people from every tribe, every colour, every nation, all around the throne, giving praise and honour and glory to God on that last day. God's kingdom may look insignificant, but it's going to swamp the nations. Now, what did God's kingdom look like at the beginning of Matthew 13? Well, Jesus was speaking from a boat with just a handful of disciples, with Pharisees who thought he was blaspheming, a family who thought he was bonkers, and crowds that were only there to see him do the miraculous. And yet where has that kingdom gone to? It's now spread to the very ends of the earth. When I grew up, there was maps which showed the British Empire covering the entire globe. They used to say the sun never set on the British Empire. But where's the British Empire today? It's gone, it's history, it's no more. And yet Jesus says the seed he plants in this world will last forever. It will grow and it will continue to grow. And it's growing in China. They say upwards of 120 million Christians at present. In Africa and South America, there's phenomenal growth. Even in Islam, in Iran and parts of the Middle East, that seed planted by missionaries, planted by radio, being planted over the web, is growing. It may not be growing in Australia, may not be growing in our suburb, but it is growing. Because the kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into about 60 pounds of flour until it worked its way through the whole dough. The kingdom of heaven will not just grow, it will permeate. It'll transform the world that is living in. It'll affect all parts of the society that it's let loose into. You see, despite its appalling failures and sins, it's beyond question that down the ages the church has an amazing record in science, medical care, social work, nursing, education, the liberation of women and slaves, the care of prisoners, the aged, the helpless, the dying. The yeast of the gospel has done some wonderful things throughout the loaf of the earth. And the yeast of the gospel has had some amazing impacts on people like you and me as well. Lives have been changed, futures transformed, sins have been repented of, love has grown, marriages have been saved, care has been given, godliness has made its mark in people like you and me. The yeast of the gospel has transformed both the global and the personal. And that should be enormously encouraging to us today. Sometimes we Christians are all doom and gloom. The world is getting darker, the opposition to the truth greater and greater. But there's power in that mustard seed. There's a transformative difference that will be made in that yeast. The mustard seed tree is growing. The yeast will even get through 27 kilos of dough. So keep running the race of life. Make sure with God's help you get to your top speed. The kingdom will make a difference. Your life is not meaningless. Even if, as you survey the fields of this world, there seems to be more weeds than wheat. Verse 24, Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servant came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. You see, while God is doing his work in his world, as the mustard seed does grow and the yeast reaches every nation, there's another force at work in this world, Satan. He can't uproot the wheat, he can't get rid of the yeast or the Christian gospel. But that doesn't mean he doesn't want to ruin the harvest. So next to the good seed, he plants bad seed. Next to the wheat, he plants a counterfeit plant, a darno seed that looks like wheat but is instead completely worthless. Satan, you see, wants to sabotage God's crop. You know, sometimes we look at what's going on in the world and we wonder if God has lost control. There's wars everywhere, violence, people in power throwing their weight around, churches falling for false doctrine, families falling apart. And we ask, why, if evil is so prevalent, why doesn't God do something about it? Why doesn't he answer my prayers? Well, the servants asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull up?" "No," he answered, "because while you're pulling up the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time, I'll tell the harvesters first to collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burnt, then gather the wheat and burn it in my barn." Every farmer knows there's a time for planting, then there's a time of waiting, before there's a time of harvesting. The kingdom of heaven has been planted. The work of God is growing, but evil will not be weeded out until the very end. Yes, Jesus has died to forgive us our sin and given us the power to say no to sin, but sin will be in God's field until the very end. We're not to uproot the world's sin. Where would we start? We're to leave that task for God. Our job is to keep sowing the seed, to keep growing the wheat, to keep running the race, and be patient and wait for God to do his work in his way at his time. Reminds me of the story of the POW camp in Germany during World War II, who managed to build a radio from bits and scraps of the things they found in the camp. And they get it transmitting. And one day they find out from a British station that the war is over. The peace treaty has been signed. That liberation was coming their way. And they waited. And they waited. And they were still in the prison camp. German guards still threatened to shoot them daily. They had to live on terrible scraps. But they knew the victory was coming. They just had to wait. And that gave them hope. They knew it would happen soon. And that's what the parable is telling us. There'll be a time when evil is defeated and destroyed. There'll be a time when you will be completely liberated from all wrongdoing. But in the meantime, don't get discouraged. Be patient. Keep running the race of faith while you keep your eyes lastly on the finish line. Verse 47. Once again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was let down into the lake and caught all kinds of fish. When it was full, the fishermen pulled it up on the shore, and they sat down and collected the good fish in baskets, but threw the bad fish away. One day there will be a separation between the good and the bad, the wheat from the weeds, the edible fish from the junk. There's a day of salvation, but there's also a coming day of judgment, and that will be at the end of the age. That's the finish line you and I are running towards. So don't give up. Keep your eyes on the prize. Don't be discouraged. Don't stop running the race of faith. And realize just as there will be wheat and weeds in the world, there'll be good fish and bad fish, even within the church. You see, the picture in this parable is that of a dragnet. You see, in those days on the Sea of Galilee, a flat-bottomed boat would tie one end of a long net to the shore, pull the other one out into the lake with corks on top and sinkers on the bottom, and then move in this great arch, and it would trap everything. The boat would complete the arc, pull the nets onto the shore, and separate from the good from the bad, the useful from the useless. Verse 49, this is how it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come and separate the wicked from the righteous and throw them into the blazing furnace where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The world is full of God-fearers and God-haters. The church itself is full of true followers and counterfeit believers. The church is and will remain a mixed assembly of regenerate and unregenerate people, born again and hypocrites until the very end. But one day the judge of the earth will pull up the weeds and throw them into the fire. Separate the wicked from the righteous, and there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. One day at the end of the race of life, there'll be only two places where mankind can go, either the kingdom of heaven or the world of eternal darkness. But please notice this parable and all of these last few parables in Matthew 13 are directed not at the crowds, but at the disciples. He's sounding the alarm to people like you and me. It's not a practice run, this is a real thing. The building is going to get burned to the ground unless you get out. Don't think this is a false alarm. Don't say this is directed to someone else. It's told to you and me. Run the race of faith with perseverance. Keep looking to the finishing line. Hell is real. Heaven is real. Make sure you make it to the very end. Because do you notice? There's a crowd watching this race. See, when Jesus had finished these parables, he moved on from there. Coming to his hometown, he began teaching the people in their synagogue, and they were amazed. Where did this man get this wisdom and these miraculous powers, they asked. Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary? And aren't his brothers James and Joseph, Simon and Judas? Aren't all his sisters with us? Where then did this man get all these things? And they took offence at him. You see, there's a choice. Some will hear the parables of Jesus and Satan will blind them to its message. It will be concealed from them. They will not honour Jesus. They will not have faith in Jesus. And so they will not escape the judgment of Jesus on that very last day. While others will understand what Jesus is saying to them today. The parables will reveal God's truth to them. They'll have ears to hear, and they'll be like the good steward of Jesus' last parable. Have you understood all these things? Jesus asked. Yes, they reply. He said to them, "Therefore every teacher of the law who's become a disciple in the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a house who brings out of his storeroom new treasures as well as old." God's followers will see the treasure in the Old Testament and will listen to its words and teach it faithfully to others. But they also know that it points to its fulfillment in Jesus in the New Testament. As Spurgeon once remarked, just as every road in England leads to London, so every Old Testament passage leads us to Jesus. So we're to learn the truth of the law, the prophets, and the writings in the Old Testament and see how they help us to understand Jesus even more. Friends, that means our job as Christians and runners of the race of life is to keep learning about Jesus and to keep pointing others to the new and old treasures that are found in Jesus. We start the race leaving everything aside to follow Jesus. We patiently keep running the race even when the world and even the church seems full of weeds and bad fish, that we begin to wonder whether we're going to make it to the very end. But we keep our eyes on God's kingdom, on the great day of judgment, and we look to Jesus to help us finish the race. He is, after all, the author and perfecter of our faith. One of my favourite all-time stories is that of Helmut Thielicke, who was a German theologian when Hitler came to power. Because he was outspoken, because of his criticism of Hitler, he was removed from his university post and sent to a small town where he began pastoring a very small church. He says that when he became a pastor, he decided to have his first midweek Bible study, for he held high hopes of making an impact on the church, on his community, but he was extremely disappointed when only 3 people came to his Bible study, 2 elderly ladies and an elderly man. He says as he sat looking at these 3 elderly people outside the church, he could hear the marching of the battalions of Hitler Youth who swore their allegiance to the Third Reich. In that moment, he wondered about the future of the Christian faith, as it seemed that the faith was dying while Hitler's war machine was growing stronger and stronger every day. Was it true that the kingdoms of the world will one day become the kingdom of our Lord and our Messiah? And then Pastor Thielicke thought of the story of the mustard seed that grew into a plant. That gave him encouragement and hope. And of course, when the dust settled, it was Hitler's kingdom that fell, not God's kingdom. That kingdom of might and force didn't last, but the kingdom of grace continues to grow. In effect, those 3 elderly people meeting as a Bible study was stronger than the armies of Hitler just outside the door. Now, do you believe that? I do. Well, then give your all up to Jesus. Don't despair at the state of the world or the church. Keep your eyes on the last day and keep running the race of life for Him and Him alone. Let's pray. Lord, help us to do this. Help us to fix our eyes on Jesus. Help us to run with perseverance and enable us to reach the end and claim the prize. And in the meantime, may we enjoy the treasure of heaven, which is Jesus Himself. And we ask this in His precious name. Amen.
The light of life was crushed for our rebellion.